of all.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks for welcoming me on. Yeah, keeping well considering. I'm hearing you describe the best second half of the championship. It's always not nice being on the losing end of it. But yeah, disappointed to lose out last weekend. But overall, an enjoyable season from a Wexford perspective. From a personal standpoint, just disappointed not to be looking forward to an All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah, I presume that drama bit, that the sort of excitement bit from a neutral perspective is something that creates more ecstasy for the winner, and for the loser just makes it all the harder to take, just being on the end of something that generally was this very, very unpredictable thing, that this roller coaster that went right to the death.
Yeah, for sure, and that's the nature of hurling, as we've seen in numerous games, that a lead can never be big enough, and when a team gets a run in you and grabs momentum at the right time, it's very difficult to stem that flow. And Clare grabbed that momentum at the right timing for them, and we weren't able to stop it, and weren't able to close the game out, which is disappointing from our perspective. But we have to learn from it, really, because we'll be in those situations again, and learn how to close the game out. But credit to Clare, they stuck in the fight, and they got the rub of the green towards the end of the game as well, which allowed them to see it out. So there'll be a match for anyone now in the remainder of the championship.
Can I just get a picture of what the last few days are like for you? I presume there is this, I'm not sure, is it a temptation to kind of wallow in the defeat quite a lot? We're 4 days out now at this point. How do you deal with it to ensure that, that cliche about not letting the low moments allow you to get too low? How do you ensure that actually happens in the aftermath of a defeat like that?
Yeah, well, I'll always say, when you're involved in a panel, especially our panel, you win together and you lose together, and ultimately after the game we're all feeling the very same way. Very disappointed that we didn't win, but at the same time, proud of ourselves that we put on a performance and put ourselves in a winning position. So yeah, the ultimate aftermath of the game, it's surrounded by the players and the backroom and the management that have worked so hard this year, enjoying each other's company, reminiscing on the year, the highs and the lows, and ultimately looking forward to 2023 and trying to put some of those wrongs to right, and developing on the good work that we've done this year. And I suppose now looking forward, it's back to routine, back to work. Life goes on. Club championship in Wexford starts next week, so we don't have too long to rest on our laurels before we put back on our club hats and go have a crack off each other next week.
It was nearly the perfect hour as well, Matthew, wasn't it? Just probably 5 or 6 points up. I think you did a nice possession in defence, which lost the ball, and Clare got a point out of it, and kind of the rally started from there. But with 10 minutes to go, you must have been really believing he could do this.
Yeah, 100%. We're in a winning position. It was kind of point for point for long spells. Clare were getting a little bit closer to us, but we were still keeping them at arm's length. But I think, we had a couple of key injuries. Shane Reck went off, Damien Reck went off as well. Guys that have been playing extremely well and keeping some of their key players relatively quiet. So that had a bearing on it. And look, we had a couple of wides, a couple of missed frees. Potentially, the penalty obviously was a big thing too. And then
were you sour about that? Because that did look, that looked very, very harsh, and that's exactly why that cynicism shouldn't be rewarded, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose, to be honest, I was at the other end of the pitch, so I couldn't really see the detail of exactly what happened, but I've since seen replays and stuff. And, I don't feel too aggrieved because, if I was on the other end and Tony Kelly or Shane O'Donnell were bearing down on goals, I'd be looking to do the same thing, But at the same time, I think referees and column lines, they probably need a little bit more help there, really. There's officials there, there's linesmen, and there's umpires, and the benefit of TV as well. I think they need more support in an instance like that for such a big call, because at that point in time, should we have received the penalty and scored it, you'd be expecting us to close it out, and that may have been the end of the game. And you just want fair decisions on both sides, but I don't think I think there's an awful lot of pressure on one man to make that decision in real time. So, well, actually, it's hard for me to say should or shouldn't be.
Yeah, it was. What would you do? Because, I think. I think criticism of referees in hurling in particular is absolutely mad, because you're talking about a ball moving at that speed and the amount of work they have to do. Are you talking about a type of a VAR situation for something like that, or just more individuals making the calls?
I think before we get to VAR, it's really giving more power to officials that have seen it. Umpires are looking at it, linesmen look on as well. I think that's the first step, because I'm always hesitant, where does it stop at VAR then, and what instances could be used, you know what I mean? And then it's like how long is a piece of thread, because there's several instances that if you analysed in slow motion with TV that look horrendous, where in real time they're nothing incidents.
Nothing happens in slow motion, like.
Yeah. But like, you don't want that to slow the game down. You don't want that to take away from it. But ultimately, it comes back to the big decisions in the match being gotten right, and no one feeling aggrieved. So whatever the best way is to do that. But I do definitely agree referees need more support. What that looks like, I'm less clear.
Like the specifics of that rule means that you can give the penalty in the black card if you're 25 metres away from the sideline, and at this point is made multiple times over the last little while that there is no line that indicates that you're 25 metres away. So the referees are automatically guessing when it comes to that. As you say, then you've got like a situation where one of his umpires in that situation 9 times out of 10 will have a better view than the referee of what's going on. More powers to the other officials, an actual line where this thing should be defined. Like, there are 2 pretty easy steps you'd have thought that could be implemented before next season.
Yeah, potentially. And, ultimately, if I'm calling lines, I don't want to be the one that grants that and then, looks back on replays afterwards and I got it wrong. And obviously, everyone saw the incident with James Ohm awarded the penalty previously. And, the furore that came up after that. So obviously referees have that in the back of their mind. And, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen a black card being given in this year's championship yet, so there's obviously a reason and a reason for the hesitancy to award it. So that means to me, or indicates to me, that referees don't feel confident making those decisions, which means that they need more support. So whatever that looks like, whether that's, indicating where the 25 metre begins or where it doesn't, or giving more ownership to the additional officials there, the linesmen, the umpires, the fourth official potentially, or bringing in TV replays where possible. That's the road I'd be looking down. But I guess that's for the powers that be to decide. But I think there's enough evidence there to suggest that there's more support needed.
I think, like, in fairness with like the Tá and Níl, which has become like almost like an accepted part overnight of Gaelic games, that and it's definitely for the better. Like, I think if you did have a situation where you could challenge 1 or 2 calls in a game, and as you say, like, Matthew, you don't want everything to be. You don't want, like, where do you stop? But if you could limit it to an extent that Wexford can challenge that, that's an open and shut case straight away. And that changes. And it adds to the drama as well for everyone watching. It's like, well, what's going to happen here? This game could swing again. But, like, ultimately you'd have to say this was an open and shut case if you did one replay of it. Like, and Wexford are very hard done by. And, it could be the difference in winning All Ireland or not.
Yeah, and you see it in other sports. I think NFL and the NBA have the opportunity for managers to challenge calls. So yeah, that's another way of looking at it. But yeah, like, as I come back to, ultimately you want the decisions gotten right at the key moments of the championship. And as you get further into the championship, the level of tension gets up and the pressure increases, and that piles onto referees too. So we need to be able to enable them to make these calls correctly, because then myself as a player and teams aren't feeling hard done by, and we're potentially walking into an All-Ireland semi-final. But look, to be honest, you can get bogged down the penalty. Like, before that, we were in a winning position. It shouldn't have come down to that. But looking back now, yes, it's an opportunity to gain back momentum, and it's one that we'd be disappointed with. But it is what it is. You're not gonna sit here going, we should be looking at an All-Ireland semi-final, because we had opportunities before that too.
Yeah, could I just ask then, Matthew, there's the first hour of the game, as you say, a couple of the defenders go off at really key moments. So if you take the first 57 minutes of the game in particular, does that suggest to you that the game plan that you had for Clare worked?
Yeah, well, we had obviously prepared very well for Clare, and we're very familiar with them over the last few years, and we know who their major players are that we need to try keep quieter if possible. And then you probably would have seen this year with Wexford how we've developed our game to be more varied in terms of where we work the ball out, but also have a more direct approach. And we've got really, really good ball winners in Conor MacDonald and Lee Chin and Rory O'Connor up front, that we want to get as much ball as possible to cause damage. And in the first half especially, I think we did that. Obviously the early goals settled us, and then Clare had a quiet start with a few missed frees and missed opportunities, but the game kind of settled into an ebb and flow then. And early second half, obviously the 2 goals and getting 7 or 8 points up, we were probably in a position where we want to be with 10 minutes to go rather than 20, 25 minutes to go. But Clare were always going to have their purple patch. Good teams, you can't keep them out of the game for 70 minutes. And you saw that in terms of how Shane O'Donnell and Tony Kelly came into it in the last 10 minutes. Their big players managed to get on possession and get key scores. And, when we wanted to push, the bodies, obviously we fresh legs in, but it takes a while for subs to sometimes make an impact. And, ultimately, mistakes happen. And the goal was really the nail in the coffin for us. And even at that, with the 6 minutes additional time, we were trying to claw back, but Clare saw it out. So, yeah, I think tactically, I thought we were where we needed to be. I just think we, the last 10, 15 minutes, you look back with regrets on how we could have slowed the game down and potentially killed it a bit quicker and slowed Clare's momentum when they got on top. That'd be the bit that I'd be looking to improve on next year.
How would you compare the two provinces? It's kind of a bit like when the Irish Horse go over to Cheltenham. How do you compare the two countries? Because Leinster, the Leinster final before the Munster final looked like two different sports really this year. I was at the Leinster final and I thought I just thought the standard was fairly inferior to what followed. But then you see Wexford really push Clare very close, and you were obviously you were fairly closely matched with Galway and Kilkenny and Leinster in the championship this year in results and the way he played. Do you feel that Munster is that bit stronger match, or would you give sort of Galway and Kilkenny a chance?
Yeah, so I think they're obviously two different styles of hurling. You look at Munster every year and, it's 35 points versus 34, 33 versus 32. So it's very high scoring, free flowing hurling. And, that's the style there. Wexford is probably a little bit more defensive. And sometimes that can look like a lower quality from a neutral's perspective. But I think you see the clashes then when the likes of us play Clare and Galway play Cork, and in that how we match up. So I think if you're looking forward to the semi-finals, Clare Limerick obviously look like the two standout teams from the Munster final and within the Munster Championship. But I would definitely be giving Kilkenny and Galway a big shout as well, because they can raise their game, and we've seen that previously in All-Ireland semi-finals. And in a one-off game with an All-Ireland final on the line, you'd be hoping that each team is going to absolutely empty it. Kilkenny, obviously everyone would have written them off going into a Leinster final, and they still managed to find enough to get over Galway. I think that they'll probably go in as underdogs versus Clare, given that Clare will expect to be at a higher standard than they were in the first half against us, because obviously we've given them a rattle and that would be a scare for them. But I think Kilkenny will be right there. Limerick look like the team to beat. Clare threw everything in the kitchen sink at them, and they still managed to persevere and get over the line. I think Galway will be under pressure, but in saying that, Henry Shefflin will have those guys well up for it, and they've got big game players there in the likes of Conor Whelan and Pádraig Mannion and Cathal Mannion, that if they get a run and can take Limerick by surprise, I can see them right in that too. So yeah, I anticipate two tight semi-finals. I'm not going to say Limerick and Clare are going to be an All-Ireland final, because you can be sure that Galway and Kilkenny will have that up in their dressing room when we're playing them next year.
I think you can read into that as you will anyway.
But I do give them a big shout. I won't be one bit surprised if I see Leinster teams getting over Limerick Clare in an All-Ireland final too.
The style of play thing is really interesting that you mentioned there, and it felt from the outside looking in that Dara Egan came in this year, didn't try to overhaul your style, didn't try and try and take you in a whole new direction, but it felt he moved you in a slightly new direction, as if it was like he took Davy's ideas and just sort of built on them this year. Is that what the reality was? Does this feel like this year was kind of like a staging post towards a new direction, or did this year kind of feel like close to the finished product on a tactical level?
No, I definitely think that we've made strides, and yeah, credit to Dara. To be fair, he's come in and he's built on all the good work that Davy's done for us. Davy's been there for 5 years, and we've developed a lot under him. But for us, it's really about trying to add layers to our game. And I think Dar's, he's identified what we're good at. We're good at running the ball out. We're good off the shoulder, but he's added that more direct style as well that we can play too, which, proved beneficial against Clare and some other teams this year too. So I do think that tactically and our style of play has developed to play more to our strengths, and we're able to mix and match it depending on what way we play the opposition. But yeah, I have to say Dara was a breath of fresh air coming in. Obviously a different style of manager to Davy, but there's been a really, really good buzz around the setup the entire year. He's brought in a lot of new guys as well, under 20s, and developed those guys, got them involved with us. And there's project work, in terms of getting them to where they need to get to contribute more. But it's been a very enjoyable dressing room and panel to be a part of this year. So obviously I've been in and around it for a while now, but albeit not getting where we wanted to get and with no silverware, I did enjoy the year, and I definitely think we're looking in a strong and healthy position to 2023 as well.
I think there was only Cork and Galway used more players than Wexford did in the league this year, so there was definitely that implementation of new players from the outset. There was also new faces off the pitch as well, Matthew, when it came to the likes of Billy Walsh and Gordon Darcy being brought into the camp. What were their roles this season?
Yeah, I suppose we wouldn't have had a huge amount of face-to-face time with Billy and Gordon, but they'd be working more directly with the backroom team as the high-performance team to, I suppose, put the processes in place in order for us to thrive. Gordon would be more so on team culture, and Billy would be more on performance mindset, and that's kind of the remit of them. But when you have guys like that have competed and achieved at the highest level in their fields, it's only beneficial to us, and we're hoping to get more face-to-face time with them for the 2023 season as well.
So when Gordon Darcy is chatting, like, does he have one-on-one conversations with any of the players, or is it mostly just stuff with the backroom team, as you say there? Like, do you have a conversation with Gordon at some point during the season?
Its majority will be directly with the backroom, and he'd be seeding messages there to us. So it wouldn't be on a one-on-one basis with us. He has addressed us once or twice as a group, but primarily with the backroom.
How receptive is the group to different ideas like that, from a rugby background, from a boxing background? Although two fellas who would have been hugely interested in hurling as young fellas, like, is it a dressing room that is very open to new ideas and new voices coming in and trying to impart some sort of wisdom?
Yeah, 100%. I think overall the panel is in a place where, we're willing to look to different areas in order to learn different things to improve us as a squad. Guys are fairly open-minded that way and willing to learn. The guys are very coachable. And obviously, look, Gordon and Billy are steeped in Wexford history. So there's obviously massive respect there in terms of what they've done in their given field. And they understand hurling as well. So it's not as if they're coming in this completely new to it. And they're aware of us as players and have engaged with us previously, and there's a personal relationship there. So guys were already open to it. So as I said, if there's anyone that's willing to contribute to move us in the right direction, players will be receptive. And I think Dar is in the same boat in terms of what he brings as a backroom team too.
Just one other thing I wanted to get your perspective on from last weekend was the whole build-up to Wexford versus Clare was, I guess, weighted towards this conversation around the suspensions of the Clare lads. I guess the guys being suspended at first, getting off the hook eventually. When you're having conversations in the build-up to the Clare game, are you talking about that? And then does the overturning of it actually change the conversations that you're having in the build-up?
From my perspective, I kind of tune out, to be honest.
Right.
In preparation for games, I control what media I consume, because you don't want other narratives getting in your head as you're preparing for a game. Ultimately, we're preparing for Clare's best 15 with plans in place, whether Peter Duggan or Rory Hickey were going to play or not. And that we were well prepared either way. And ultimately, it's not for us to decide. It's not our decision, so we'll deal with whatever's there. But as we want to play the best Clare team there and want to overcome them, we would never want to see other players suspended. So it wouldn't have been a big bone of contention for us in the lead up to it. We would have been just focusing on ourselves and preparing for the best Clare team to be there, because whoever's going to replace those guys are going to be equally as challenging. So it wouldn't have been that high up in our conversations.
Do you feel you're far off, Match? I think you're 31 this year, is it like? So you're kind of obviously at the point in your career where I guess you're hoping for success in the near future. Do you feel you are far off in terms of going very close next year or the year after?
I don't think we're too far off. I think you look at the season overall. Ultimately, no silverware, which is disappointing. The league gets to the last four. Progressive used a lot of players, as you mentioned, and got to the knockout stage, the last four there. Disappointed not to be in a Leinster final, which is ultimately down to us. It's our own fault, given the Westmeath result and Dublin beating us. But obviously getting over Kilkenny shows and drawing with Galway shows we're right there. So we're disappointed not to be able to compete for that. And, realistically, we should have been closing the game out from the position we were in last weekend. So that's disappointing. But with the power of the group and, the development that's going on in the background, we have new players coming through there as well. Oisin Foley and Conor Devitt making championship debuts this year, Conor Hearn as well, and some other guys coming in like Conor Flood and Charlie McGuckin. There's new players in this panel that have only got first taste of action this year that are going to bring us on. But yeah, I don't think we're too far off. And look, yeah, you mentioned I'm 30-31, but as I said, it's one of the more enjoyable years I've had. And I think there's a lot of guys around my age within our squad that feel similar. So I think we're well positioned to give it another rattle next year. And, teams ebb and flow. They get better, and some guys will go away. So we'll have to see what way it lands in 2023. But I don't think we're too far off, being honest.
What were those few days like after the Westmeath result, actually, Matthew? Because I know I've very sensitively try and tune out all sorts of social media and media during the season, but I would imagine it wasn't. It was pretty poisonous, to be fair, in terms of what you were seeing on social media with regards to the Westmeath draw. Was that manifest at all in your day-to-day life in the days afterwards?
No, not my day-to-day life. I don't really let that sort of thing phase me anymore, with the benefit of experience. But you know yourself, you're never as good as you think you are when you win. You're never as bad as they say you are when you lose, and I always remember that phrase with instances like that. Ultimately, 3 points up, we had 21 wides against Westmeath, but hurling, as you know, if you leave a team in with a shout, any high ball can happen and a goal can come off it. If you leave a team in the melting pot there at the very end of the game, and ultimately we got caught, and that's on us. Disappointing, but obviously we knew as a team that we it wasn't good enough, and I thought that we put that wrong to right against Kilkenny to show I suppose Ireland what we're about. But yeah, that level of consistency and ensuring that we don't slip up in those instances is obviously an area for improvement next year as well.
It would be obviously, like, Wexford don't want to be drawn against Westmeath, but just reflecting on that time, I think like what that did for Westmeath hurling, and that, like, you look at Antrim leading Cork at half time, and how would you match it? It's something I definitely feel that the GAA needs to put a huge effort into, is promoting hurling, because it's like, for a sport that is arguably the greatest field sport in the world, like it's just so limited in terms of its scope across 32 counties. I think is really something that it shouldn't be the case, because like anyone who goes to a hurling game, whether they've never seen a game before, will be amazed by it. And I know you don't want to be drawn to Westmeath, but I think that gives a lot of heart to counties like Westmeath as well. You saw, it was a Mac Nicholas who got the goal, and he's been soldiering with them for so long. How would you kind of promote the spread of hurling across Ireland? Because, as I say, I just feel like when you have 5 or 6 counties every year out of 32, like, there's something not right.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And, I've played long enough when Wexford were at that level where we were knocking on the door for Division 1 and yo-yoing up and down from the Division 2 to Division 1. And that doesn't benefit any teams trying to make the jump. And to be fair, Westmeath have put on some really good performances this year under Joe Fortune. And they're well capable of competing at that level. But it takes more than 1 year to bridge a gap to where the top teams are at. So I think in previous years you'd find that in Leinster specifically, the bottom team gets relegated, new team comes up next year, they go down, and a new team comes back up, and that's not serving any purpose to the longer term development of hurling in those counties. And if you're a player within that instance, you're asking yourself, what's the point? So I think we need to create more opportunities for longer term sustainable development for these counties, to bring them to a level where they can compete with the top teams. It's going to take time, and there needs to be an acknowledgement that it's not a 1 or 2 year fix, but the betterment of hurling is the priority here. So instances where the likes of Kerry enter a Munster Championship, you expand the provincials to incorporate an Offaly, a Westmeath, an Antrim, to allow these teams more games against the highest level opposition, which will ultimately bring them on. And
is that the key? Is that the key? Like playing better teams more often?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the only way to develop themselves, because how do you know where you're at if you're not testing yourself consistently? And if you're a player within those teams, knowing that you're going to be coming up against Division 1 opposition consistently, you understand you have to raise your standards, and that leads to development and learning. And coaches in those instances as well, it comes back to that. Highest level coaches will want to be coaching at the top level. With more opportunities to do that means the level of coaching can increase, and then that filters back into the underage development, where players within those squads know that they've got a chance to play against the top players in the game, and that's more aspirational for them. And ultimately, it's where we want all hurling to go. Like, you want the future of hurling to be, as you said, more widespread throughout the country rather than in the pockets it currently is. So I think that there's work there still to be done.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because obviously you played Kerry as well as Westmeath this year. It wasn't a complete hammering for Kerry that afternoon in Tralee. So there is a sense that maybe the gap is closing between the elite few counties and the chasing pack. It's just about how you capitalise on that. And it sounds, Matty, that you wouldn't be overly against the idea of maybe expanding to provincials just a little bit, even though it might take from the week in, week out nature of the chaotic elitism that we've seen over the last couple of years, which has given us brilliant games.
It's like that Westmeath, that was one of the highlights of the championship for so many people.
It's true, and it wasn't on television, it wasn't live on TV, because nobody really expected it. That we are very focused on the heavyweight clashes, which are great, but it sounds like that you would be in favour of giving this thing a chance, to give more underdogs an opportunity to play the top teams in the championship.
Yeah, I would be in favour of it. I think more opportunities to the developing teams can only be beneficial for hurling in the longer term, for sure. So I don't know what that looks like or what that means structure-wise, but I think if you ask most players, they would like to see the game expanded. And it's probably bodes well for sustainability of the game in the future as well. So, as I said, there's more work to be done there, I think.
Just one last thing before we let you go. How are you feeling about the split season in general, Matthew? Is it something that you're looking forward to? Is it good to be finished up early in the year, or how do you think this thing will go?
It's definitely not good to be finished up early in the year from the start. I obviously want to extend the intercounty team season as long as I could, but to be honest, the split season, this is the first full year of it. So I think there's obviously the first instance for people when they're looking at it going, God, it's very early for intercounty to be finished, but this is the plan, and I think with any change, people are a bit sceptical about it. But for me, the busy nature, the games coming thick and fast are absolutely brilliant. You're not getting flogged in midweek. There's obviously the block of pre-season at the start of the year, but then it's game in, game out, and as players, that's what you want. And I think it kind of contributed to why I felt it was such an enjoyable year. And if you ask most players, they're probably in the same boat in terms of they want to be playing more matches and training less, and that was an ask from players previously. So from that perspective, really, really positive, really, really enjoyable. And I think from a club perspective, if I put my club hat on, my team that I'm going back to play with now, they knew that they're going to be playing around end of June, July, potentially end of July. So that gives them a window opportunity where they know they need to be ready for. So they can go on holidays before that. They can do whatever they want to do while the intercounty season is on, rather than having to prepare for a couple of games in April, then a couple of months off and then prepare for another few games. So I think it'll be more sustainable and enjoyable for both sets, intercounty and club players moving forward. So with any change, it takes a bit of a bedding in period, but so far so good from my perspective.
Are you back out with the club this weekend?
Not this weekend. Next Tuesday is the first round, so gearing up for that. I've I think a challenge game now on Friday, so I'll link in with the guys now and see what they're looking like.
It means you can go wine tasting on Sunday in Dublin like the rest of us.
That's it. Johnny Ward's looking for a few tag-alongs if you're interested.
Is that an open invitation, Johnny?
Absolutely, Matthew. I think we have a couple of mutual friends. I'll get on to them there and get your number.
Good stuff.
Matthew, great stuff. Thanks a million for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers. That's Matthew O'Hanlon of the Wexford Hurlers on the line.